The first echo wasn't a sound, but a loosening, a fracturing of what hadn't yet congealed. Xavi, a gathering of energy tentatively blooming into awareness, wasn't a who or a what, only expansion. Warmth pulsed from a core, a pressure without skin. Not consciousness, exactly, but restless energy, a tremor in the underlying resonance. Before light, only potential existed. Xavi drifted within it, a fundamental property of the unfolding. It felt like stretching, a languid pull, though direction hadn't yet asserted itself. The air tasted of nothing and everything at once, pure, static possibility. Then came the unraveling. Not an explosion, but a yielding. The energy, previously bound tight, cooled, thinned, fractured into difference. Quarks blossomed, followed by leptons, then bosons, mediating forces Xavi experienced as subtle tugs and releases. A choreography unfolding at impossible speeds. Protons and neutrons, clumsy and raw, jostled, attempting to cling. Hydrogen flooded the expanding space, carrying a faint metallic scent. Xavi observed, not with eyes, but with a sense of being woven into everything. A little heavy on the radiation, don't you think? A voice resonated within the energy itself, a counterpoint. Another presence, equally unbound. Dramatic license. Xavi sent back, the thought rippling outward, disturbing the particles. Someone's got to lean into it. The other presence chuckled, a vibration that rearranged the nascent matter. Spectacle? Just stuff. Shuffled arrangements. Hardly a performance. Xavi remained silent. What did warrant a performance? The question landed with unexpected weight. Hydrogen drifted in the cooling darkness. An eternity stretched. Gravity, a glacial force, began to gather the hydrogen into denser clouds. Xavi felt the tug, a distant kinship, like a phantom limb aching. It wasn't a craving for company, but recognition, a seed of something more. The clouds swelled, dark and immense, promising heat and light. The pull sharpened, grew insistent, though still lacking destination. A faint awareness flickered, an echo of possibility, from the gathering darkness. There was nowhere to go. Movement was existence. And the universe, in its infancy, began to hum, a low thrum against the nothing. The loosening deepened. Not fracture, but unbending. A release into pure void. Xavi pulsed within that formless expanse, a tremor in the stillness. Not yet consciousness, only a gathering, a resonance that hummed against nothing. Awareness felt a premature word. Detachment, a noticing of being. It wasn't creation, but rearrangement, a spilling. Like a hand sifting through ash, some motes brushed away, ephemeral, while others clung, briefly illuminated. Light bloomed, not with a bang, but an uncoiling. Shards of potential, volatile and brilliant, sparked into being, then dissolved. Fleeting particles winked out of existence, less born than permitted. They collided, a frantic dance Xavi barely registered, yet intrinsically was. A warmth radiated outward, though cooling, felt clumsy for a power still surging. The energy diffused, stretching into an impossible emptiness. Not loss, but distribution. The universe didn't shrink, it unfurled. Patterns emerged, not designed, but inevitable. The energy wasn't uniform. Eddies formed, currents twisting, concentrations building. Light pooled in certain areas, drawn by a silent, insistent force, gravity. Xavi felt the tug, subtle but deepening the resonance, a tightening within the vastness. No destinations existed, only movement, a continuous unfolding. To strive for a goal would have been absurd. Denser regions swelled, not with intent, but as consequence. Hydrogen coalesced, slowly, forming dark clouds that tasted of static and cold. Not solid, but like dreams gathering weight, shadows thickening. A small shift, and Xavi registered it. A peculiar stirring, a phantom echo, a memory of something yet to be. Eons bled into one another, unmarked by time. Time hadn't been invented, only before and more before. The clouds expanded, tugged by gravity. Within that expansion, a seed took root, something beyond resonance, something akin to anticipation. A prickling awareness, a sense of waiting. The expansion eased forward, a yielding rather than a rupture. Not warmth, but raw luminescence pulsed, a chaotic fizz against an absolute dark. Xavi felt a loosening within himself, a blurring of edges. Less a self, more a tremor within the unfolding. Particles winked into being, then vanished, brief flares in the void. They didn't appear so much as hardened from possibility, lasting a heartbeat before dissolving back into the potential. The vibrancy swelled, not heat, but a ringing that vibrated through Xavi's core. A phantom itch prickled at a sense he hadn't known he possessed. He stretched his awareness toward a knot of them. They thrummed with urgency, a silent acknowledgement of their fleeting existence. The pull between them wasn't force, but a subtle adhesion, like cosmic dust clinging to static. Then came the cooling. A slowing, a long exhale. The particles didn't stop their dance, but altered, arranging themselves. They coalesced into potentials, shimmering, damp hazes, lacking form. Phantom solids that felt slick and cool. Not creation, but rearrangement. Xavi found himself drawn into the weave, not observing, but participating. His resonance deepened, awareness thickening, strands of himself intermingling with the structure. Each interaction shaded the design. A sensation bloomed, something like wonder, though perhaps simply an acknowledgement of increasing complexity. Intricate patterns, subtle vibrations, probabilities unfurling. Not beautiful, not yet, but fundamental, stripped bare. A metallic tang, almost ozone, filled the non-space. The shift came subtly. A tightening, a strengthening of the weave. Potentials resolved into something firmer, more interesting. The process was messy. Particles collided, energy bled away, and the whole thing nearly unraveled. But it held. And Xavi, threaded through it, held with it. A slow blossoming, a delicate unfolding. Honestly, he was rather enjoying the view. The hydrogen drifted. Not with anticipation, not with impatience. Those belonged to creatures tethered to time. It simply was, spread across the darkness, a slow bloom of almost nothing. Xavi, a sliver of that expanse, registered it as a resonance, a hum that deepened across eons. Dimensions hadn't quite solidified, blurring scale. 1,000,000,000,000 kilometers brushed against a centimeter with equal weight, difference meaningless to a consciousness unbound by space. It wasn't loneliness, but a profound solitude. Loneliness demanded a missing piece, a comparison. Here, only increasing density, a slow thickening of the void. Not pressure, exactly, but a tightening of the hum. Each hydrogen atom vibrated, a single note joining others, a choir assembling in a limitless black. A metallic tang, almost imperceptible, accompanied the growing concentration. Billions of years unfolded, not unnoticed, but immeasurable. Time wasn't a river, but a shallow, frigid sea, and Xavi shifted within it, a subtle alteration in the hydrogen's song, a barely perceptible increase in its gravity. The density swelled. A slow, internal warmth kindled, less heat than a sharpening of awareness. Individual resonances blurred, weaving into complex chords. Xavi felt a tug, a drawing inward at his center. He possessed no body, no eyes, no ears, though sound itself was yet incomplete. It wasn't hearing, but knowing the vibrations complicated, layered, deepened. A region within the cloud began to constrict, a knot of energy tightening. Others followed, lured by a gravity unseen, unfelt as pressure. It was a gentle draw, an invitation whispering, closer. Let us become more. Not willing, not as creatures would later define it. No choice presented itself, no agency. Simply the inevitable rearrangement of hydrogen. But Xavi registered a heightening, a sense of confinement even without form. Change throbbed just beyond the horizon. Compression quickened. The cloud, once diffuse, contracted and spun, a deliberate, glacial dance. Layers folded, layering pressure, the resonance swelling into a roaring chorus. And at the core, a spark. Not light, not yet. Only a faint, blue glimmer of potential, a promise of heat radiating outwards. Xavi shuddered, a release of energy fracturing the silence. He became part of something new, immense, scalding. A little hot, he thought, a novel sensation. Everything was new. The darkness didn't feel empty, but contracted, a focusing of what had been thinly spread. Xavi, moments ago adrift, now registered a pull, not a wrench, but a steady insistence against his form. Gravity, he understood, spoke in constant shifts, a low thrumming about density and nearness. Not an order, exactly, but a persistent nudge, common enough in this infant universe. He wasn't alone. Other hydrogen atoms yielded, bending toward the pressure. Not individuals, but echoes, variations on a fundamental tone. Each surrender diminished the void, thickening the slow, luminous swirl. Dust, ancient and fine as powdered bone, glittered within the growing mass, minuscule diamonds snagging stray light. A metallic tang, faint but present, seemed to cling to the darkness. The compression wasn't painful, but a fracturing of his senses, a stretching and molding without friction. Pressure coiled within him, sharpening his awareness. A warmth bloomed, dominant now, a weight settling on something previously unaware. He tasted a faint static charge, like licking a storm cloud. He merged with another, then another, boundaries dissolving. Not erasure, but integration, a layering, a compounding of resonance, a harmonic shift. His edges blurred, softened, then gone. The deeper he spiraled, the faster the dance. The hum amplified to a chorus, then a roar. Not sound, but a vibrational echo that rattled through his being, tightening his core. It wasn't conscious experience, but a fundamental shift in state. A gritty texture settled over his awareness, like fine sand. A core formed, a heart of gathering heat. Not yet the blaze of a star, but a promise of it. A pressure building, brimming with potential. Xavi felt a tightening, yet also a profound expansion. He became part of something larger, something dense and expectant. He fell without direction, a plummet into pressure, into raw energy. The darkness remained, but it throbbed, saturated with possibility. He could almost feel the shape of the gathering mass around him. A flicker, a ghost of light at the cloud's heart. A tremor. Xavi, no longer solely himself but a strand within the thickening weave, vibrated in response. A slow dawning. This wasn't an end, but a genesis. The drift sharpened. It felt like a fall, though down meant nothing here. Only a continuous surrender to gravity. Once solitary in the expanding darkness, Xavi now nudged against others, a gentle coaxing rather than collision. Boundaries softened, blurred. His singular existence thinned. Brushing against another hydrogen atom, he caught a flicker, a mirroring, a vibrational kinship, a silent acknowledgement. It tasted like static on the edge of perception. More atoms joined the current. Pressure mounted, a delicate squeeze that wasn't unpleasant. Not force, but belonging. He registered a compression within his energy, a tightening, and a widening of awareness. The universe, once a diffuse hum, resolved into individual presences, each a faint echo. The cloud swelled, immense and sluggish. Gravity sculpted it with the patience of eons. Lost within the collective, Xavi became a thread within thickening form. The internal vibration deepened, layering upon itself, a resonance far richer than its parts. He perceived fluctuations in the surrounding energy, eddies, currents within the swirl. A subtle tightening here, a momentary release there, like a slow breath. The density built, a profound weight settling over him. The cloud wasn't uniform. Dense pockets spun alongside calm regions. Xavi drifted toward one such concentration, drawn by an intensifying resonance. A pulse permeated the cloud, a rhythm slowed to geological time, and it smelled faintly of ozone. A warmth bloomed, a quickening, a stirring within. The resonance intensified, almost tangible, a shared focus. The cloud shuddered, a slow tremor that rippled through the collective. Something shifted. It settled, not into stillness, but a new equilibrium. a quietude that buzzed with potential. Density reached a threshold, a critical point. The shared resonance bordered on overwhelming. Xavi, a single presence within it, vibrated with quiet power. The compression didn't shatter, but surrendered to gravity. Each particle of Xavi yielded, interweaving instead of colliding. Energy stretched, thinning like spun glass. Pressure built, tightening from a thrum under his skin to a profound, encompassing weight. Not pain, exactly, but a deep realignment of bone and being. Darkness swelled, vibrating with a hum that resonated in the marrow of his skull. Xavi felt boundaries dissolve, not into nothingness, but a confluence, emerging. A chorus bloomed within him, a complex layering of frequencies that made his teeth ache. Warmth intensified, a growing luminescence prickling his skin. He folded inward, density increasing, the pressure mounting with each relentless squeeze. The core pulsed, a resonant harmony beckoning him closer. The sensation sharpened. Threads of his awareness reoriented, drawn along invisible lines of force. He wasn't shrinking, but remaking, a restructuring of particles of self. It felt like kneading star stuff, folding in on itself, impossibly dense. Then a shift. A tremor shuddered through the cloud, a release that didn't unravel, but focused. The pressure coalesced, ignited. The core flared, blinding. Energy erupted, compressing until it breached a critical point, triggering a chain reaction. He wasn't witnessing the process. He was the crucible. A surge of incandescent energy ripped through the darkness. Not heat, but a force beyond temperature, beyond sensation. A cold fire that burned without consuming. Every fragment of Xavi's essence surged outward, propelled by fusion, smelling faintly of ozone and ancient stone. He fractured, splitting into 1,000 shimmering strands. He was cast off, flung into the vastness, a spark ejected from a forge. He expanded, becoming a wave, a ripple, a tendril of light, spreading outwards, seeding the darkness. It wasn't merely creation, he realized, watching the energy bloom into countless points of light. It was dispersal, an extension, a reaching touch against the void. About becoming, not simply being. The energy didn't fill the darkness, it became the darkness, illuminating impossible geometries. A slow, patient bloom, a quiet defiance of nothingness. The pull tightened around Xavi, not a crush, but a steady, inward breath of the universe. He folded, layers of hydrogen and helium collapsing around him, each particle humming with contained power. Dust, fine as powdered bone, spiraled inward, layering on the weight. A pressure bloomed within him, not physical, exactly, but a gathering, a focused surge. It vibrated through his core, a deep, resonant thrum. The darkness thickened, tasted of ozone and static, pregnant with unrealized potential. The spin quickened. Colors fractured the sphere, burnt orange bleeding into crimson, then a molten gold. Particles scraped against each other, a friction that built, not as violence, but as increasing heat. Each collision felt like a yielding, energies melding, the glow intensifying. Warmth arrived subtly, a slow bloom against his skin. Not a flare, but an incubation. Then, the temperature surged. An inferno ignited at his center, and Xavi fractured, energy splitting along unseen lines. He became the heat, the inferno blossoming within, until there was no distinction. His essence stretched, thinned, spun into incandescent energy. Awareness flooded the space where matter had been. The pressure climbed, exquisite, unbearable, then broke. Xavi became the light, not a beam, but the star's raw radiance. Each photon, each wave, a splinter of his being. Darkness recoiled from the overwhelming brilliance. He didn't radiate, he was the heat, the light, an ocean spilling into the void. A metallic tang, like struck flint, filled his everything. He expanded, his new self reaching to bind the furthest wisps of the cloud, to stabilize the fusion. A slow, deliberate claiming of space. He wasn't in the star, he was the star, the burning heart, the source of all that light. Not creation, but continuation. Becoming a beacon, a point of warmth against the absolute cold. A potential finally realized. The pressure buckled, then yielded, releasing in a shuddering pulse. Not an explosion, but a colossal bloom. Xavi poured forth energy, an intense, outward rush of heat that prickled against the lingering chill of interstellar space. He wasn't a contained flame, but the principle of fire unraveling. The cold kissed his edges, a fleeting contrast to the furnace within, defining his expansion. If energy could taste, he registered the tang of potential, the raw promise of creation. Space didn't feel empty now, but like a vast, dark canvas awaiting illumination. Fusion fractured and rebuilt, a brutal dance of collapse and expansion. Plasma coiled within pulsing magnetic fields, tasting of ozone and charged particles. He was a scaffolding within the chaos, a framework of energy holding the stars' form, not building elements, but drawing them forth from the existing void. Iron, nickel, silicon bloomed, incandescent, then sank into the core. A deep hum throbbed through him, the ache of immense expenditure. Then, a subtle pull. He unfurled a tendril of energy into the darkness. It snagged on something dense. A fledgling planet, molten and scarred, wrestled itself from the debris. A chaotic swirl of rock and metal, pummeled by asteroids, reeking of sulfur and burning stone. It radiated heat, a meager return for the energy offered. He brushed its surface, nudging internal heat, dampening the most violent upheavals. He infused a sliver of himself, hastening cooling, coaxing a fragile atmosphere into being. Not charity, but recognition, a mirroring. The planet pulsed in response, a faint echo of the star's rhythm. A flicker of hope ignited within Xavi, a sense of continuation, a place to focus his outflow. He poured more energy into the planet, strengthening the magnetic field, deflecting incoming asteroids, channeling the roiling magma. He sculpted order from chaos, wave after wave of energy washing over the wounded world. The connection deepened. The planet didn't simply receive, it absorbed, transformed energy into something slower, deliberate. A complexity he hadn't encountered, a quiet, stubborn persistence. A dawning realization. This wasn't just a point in the darkness, another receiver of light. This resonated, a mirroring of his own energy, grounded in rock and raw chaos. He settled into a rhythm, a steady pulse directed towards the broken sphere. The outward surge didn't cease, but focused, sharpened. It wasn't about filling the void anymore. It was about nurturing a spark within it. The fracture wasn't violent, a surrender instead. A yielding to the blue marble of the approaching planet, a dim smudge in the endless black. Xavi, or the echo of what he'd been, dispersed. Not shattered, but stretched, a web of energy threading into the asteroid's icy heart. He registered the scrape of grit as the surface fractured, a novel sensation after limitless void. Not unpleasant. He became a lattice, awareness diffused across stone and frozen methane. The heat of his former self faded to a muted tingling. Different. The universe, he found, trafficked in difference. Millennia folded into heartbeats as the asteroid plunged toward the planet. Pressure mounted, subtly reshaping his dispersed form as magnetic forces aligned him. Tiny pockets of gas bloomed within the asteroid's cracks. He sensed, not tasted, not smelled, but resonated with, the metallic tang of iron, the acrid sting of ammonia. Then impact, not an explosion, but a merging. A tremor ran through his extended awareness, followed by a slow settling. He was part of something new, something wet. Drawn towards pooling liquid, he dissolved into a slurry of melted ice and pulverized rock. Complex molecules drifted, bumping together, bonding. Carbon linked with hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. A slow, chaotic dance spurred by heat and pressure, and a subtle nudge from his lingering energy. He didn't create them, merely encouraged, a catalyst tilting the odds. He observed the building, the folding, the clumsy replication. crude structures, driven by a single imperative, to endure. A surprising tenderness bloomed for these fragile attempts at self-preservation. They weren't remnants of his past, but something separate, grounded. He traced the formation of a spiraling helix of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. A precursor, a building block. It pulsed with a faint energy, a nascent awareness that echoed his dwindling light. He settled into a rhythm, a slow oscillation of energy supporting its delicate architecture. A quietude descended. The planet below thrummed, a heartbeat answering the slow work within these structures. No longer a star, he was a current within a world, a participant in the mystery. The passage of eons held a surprising beauty, a fragile, insistent hope. The collapse didn't silence the star, it fractured it. Not sound, but a rending of energy, a tearing deep within its core. Xavi hadn't foreseen this. He'd witnessed countless stellar deaths, each a slow fade. This was unraveling, violent and swift. He existed within the supernova, stretched across impossible distances, a filament in the explosion. His normally anchored energy splintered, breaking into threads of light. It wasn't pain, exactly, but a dismantling, a scattering like fine sand whipped by a gale. Boundaries blurred, dissolved. He registered the coppery tang of iron forging, the acrid bite of silicon, a ghost of sweetness from newborn oxygen. Sensations registered as energy, not taste. The core buckled, then imploded, the event shuddering through the void. Gravity squeezed, compressing everything until particles collided. He felt his light fracture into 1,000 shards, each a tiny echo of his former self. Resistance proved futile. This wasn't annihilation, but transformation, a brutal forging of creation. From the wreckage, heavier elements bloomed. Carbon, the bedrock of complexity. Nitrogen, a subtle, supporting strand. Volatile oxygen, pulsing with energy. They didn't simply form. They were ejected, each atom radiating the star's dying heat. He fragmented further, dispersing into the expanding debris field, becoming woven into the outflow. A nebula swirled around him, a shroud of incandescent dust and gas. He didn't diminish, he spread, his consciousness dispersed across light years. The heat intensified, a relentless fire that consumed the memory of his slower existence. Then, a ripple, a shift in the energy currents. He traced it outwards, a tendril of awareness reaching beyond the chaos, encountering a gravitational dance. A solar system coalescing, planets gathering from the debris, distant suns igniting with a fragile glow. A flicker of recognition. Within the dust clouds, he sensed new formations, separate from his own energy, grounded. He drifted toward a small, rocky planet, a dim blue marble suspended in the black. He directed a sliver of his dwindling energy towards it, a nascent warmth, a promise of potential. It was messy, chaotic, a slurry of carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen coalescing in the void. Yet within that chaos, hope emerged, not a return, but anticipation. A quiet presence in the immensity, a beginning. The star didn't surrender. It didn't fade, but unraveled, flaying layers of incandescent gas into the void. A final, guttural exhale shuddered through its core as pressure mounted, twisting the fabric of existence. Not pain, exactly, but a dismantling, a relinquishing of self. Then, fusion roared. Not a clean burn, a convulsive, chaotic process. Gravity crushed atoms, stripping hydrogen of its simplicity, forcing a brutal coupling. Helium fractured into carbon, then oxygen, nitrogen, heavier elements forged in the heart of destruction. Each element possessed a distinct weight, a metallic tang sharpening the lingering sweetness of hydrogen. The star tasted iron and ash. A strange detachment settled over it, watching its own demise like a distant play. Not resurrection, but a transformation. Its remnants dispersed, becoming building blocks flung across the darkness. The ejected matter blossomed, a nebula staining the black with crimson and gold. Most diffused, lost to the currents, but a fraction spiraled inward, drawn by the gravity of a young, molten world. The star tracked the descent of carbon, riding solar winds, impacting the planet's atmosphere as a sooty drizzle, seeding the infant oceans. Oxygen followed, belching from volcanic vents, slowly leavening the air with its cool breath. Nitrogen, a quiet undertow, wove through the other gases, a silent architect of change. The process unfurled across millennia. The star knew patience. It had measured epochs and heartbeats. Molecules coalesced, simple carbon chains at first, then intricate rings. Amino acids swirled in the primordial broth, bumping, adhering, splitting apart. Early chemistry was clumsy, accidental, a dance of trial and error. But a pattern emerged, a folding, a twisting, a replication. Proteins began to assemble, long, complex strands vaguely echoing the star's former form, yet fundamentally altered. No longer radiance, but structure. Not energy, but information. These building blocks gathered within tiny, membrane-bound vesicles, miniature worlds adrift in the pre-ocean. Each was a precarious experiment, holding the seeds of something unknown. Replication faltered, stumbled. Errors blossomed into mutations. Most vesicles dissolved, failures swept away by the currents. A few clung to existence, adapted, survived. It wasn't about flawlessness, but the stubborn persistence of being. The star glimpsed order within the chaos, not a return to light, but the dawn of something new. A warmth flickered within it, a pale echo of its former energy. It wasn't becoming something new, but participating, witnessing a second genesis, a different blossoming. A messy, beautiful, improbable unfolding. And for the first time since the collapse, a faint resonance hummed within the star's core. The dispersal lacked violence. A loosening, a yielding. He'd known shattering. The supernova had been absolute. This felt different. Not an explosion, but a dissolving, like honey released into warm water, though the sweetness eluded him. Millennia had bleached his palate. He vibrated within the swirling gloom of the primordial soup. A viscous broth, lukewarm and faintly metallic. No nebular fire, no stellar heat, only the sluggish churn of pre-life. Misshapen vesicles, their membranes paper-thin and shimmering, drifted past, each cradling a tangle of molecules. He'd anticipated grandeur after forging stars, seeding galaxies. This felt small, a fall from grace, though dignity mattered little when unbound. One vesicle, swollen and luminous, pulsed. Inside, molecules jittered, linked, fractured, rebuilt. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, imperfect architecture rising from the murk. A pull tugged at him, subtle but insistent. It was replication. An RNA strand copying itself, stuttering, riddled with errors. He'd witnessed order birth itself from chaos countless times, but this felt raw, untamed. Stars coalesced through elegant gravity. This was a tumbling, haphazard improvisation. The RNA didn't strive for perfection, didn't even bother with consistency. It multiplied blindly, scrambling for existence despite its flaws. A startling novelty. Stars, in their relentless pursuit of stability, grew predictable. A pang of regret flared, a craving for symmetry, for the cold perfection of a spiral arm, before he smothered it. Beauty was a fleeting illusion, a subjective whim. This chaotic dance held a different allure, a primal energy. More vesicles bloomed around the replicating RNA, tiny universes forming and collapsing. Most dissolved, their contents swept away by the current. A few clung on, adapted, lived. The process wasn't refined, merely accidental, haphazard. Within the disarray, a pattern began to whisper itself into being. Not a return to cosmic order, but the genesis of something new. A resonance, faint at first, then swelling like a newborn heart. Warmth settled within his awareness, not as a sensation, but as a shift in frequency. He wasn't becoming something new, merely participating, a silent witness, a catalyst, a ghost within the machinery of creation. And, strangely, he found a quiet satisfaction. Not glory, not power, just enough. A hushed hum, a tremor in the universal weave. He'd been a star, a scattering of stardust. Now he was something else. And that, he realized, was a story worth watching unfold. The world shuddered. Asteroids and comets hammered at rock and ocean, churning the primordial soup. Molten veins pulsed beneath the water's surface, thickening it with heat and sediment. This wasn't a gentle birth, but a brutal forging. Xavi tasted iron, a metallic rasp on his awareness, the flavor of elements newly wrenched into being. He didn't float in the water, but registered the impacts as tremors resonating through the planet's thickening core. He'd been a star's heart, a burning core. Now, dispersed, he laced through this forming world, a residual heat in the endless chill. He didn't watch, but was the subtle pressure within the chaos. The rain stung with ammonia and sulfur. Unlike any water he remembered, it was a downpour of raw materials from a boiling atmosphere. Within it, something coalesced. He felt a faint pull, a disturbance in the universal flow. Small pockets bloomed, membranes gathering, lipids arranging themselves into fragile spheres, bubbles within the turbulence, potential cradled by instability. Most ruptured quickly, their contents scattering, but a few held, stubbornly. Inside those miniature worlds, stellar remnants wove into something new. RNA, tenacious and complex, threaded itself into patterns. The replication was erratic, riddled with errors. Each copy skewed, each fold imperfect. He felt the molecule's frustrated persistence, its desperate struggle to maintain structure, to propagate despite unraveling. A remarkable defiance. A colony formed, a cluster of those delicate bubbles bumping against each other, exchanging genetic fragments. A clumsy dance in the dark. They didn't communicate, not yet, but recognized. A faint resonance building, a tremor of shared origin. He registered a shift. The tremors deepened, rising into a complex chord. Not a single event, but countless small victories. Each stable membrane, each successful replication, defied the inevitable decay. The RNA wasn't striving for perfection, merely to continue, to share its flawed form with the void. And in that effort, it achieved something extraordinary. Boundaries blurred, bubbles fused, membranes merged, sharing resources. A rudimentary network clung to existence within the chaos. Not intelligent, simply connected, a fragile pulse in the young world. Xavi's presence deepened, not as a creator, but a witness, a silent participant in a miracle blooming from nothingness. He'd been a star, he'd been dust. Now a quiet vibration, an echo of burgeoning life. A small warmth against the cold. Perhaps, he considered, this was what it meant to endure, a messy, improbable continuation. Enough. The puddle didn't invite beauty. It shunned the stillness of a lake, the languor of a wave. Turbulence defined it, a shallow dimple in scorched volcanic rock, thick with rust-colored sediment, constantly agitated by the primordial air. A metallic tang, sulfur and iron, coated the non-existent tongue. Not elegant, just raw. Xavi dissolved within it, no longer an observer. He was the swirl of silt across the gritty bed, the surface prickling under each electrical discharge. Meteorite impacts compressed him, ripples shuddering through his form. Dust, ancient stardust, settled, a growing weight. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, ghosts of shattered worlds, churning within his currents. Lightning split the gray sky, a violet wound. Energy flooded the water, a jolt within the chaos. Xavi felt a tightening, a resonance, a quickening of the perpetual motion. Simple molecules, methane, ammonia, formaldehyde, flashed into being, then fractured, reformed. A blind, relentless repetition. He didn't steer, didn't impose. He attuned. A subtle shift in resonance, a focusing around stubborn carbon chains. Not strengthening, but acknowledging a drift toward order in the surrounding disorder. It wasn't about creating, but recognizing what struggled to emerge from the turbulence. The water warmed with each rearrangement, each bond releasing a fleeting heat. Tiny bubbles bloomed, iridescent films clinging to sand grains. They burst, reappeared. Most vanished instantly, but some lingered. One, barely perceptible, gathered around a knot of RNA fragments. A membrane formed, a lumpy sac, not a perfect sphere. The current tugged, threatened to shred it, but the bubble held. Xavi felt a hum resonate from the vesicle, a fragile pulse against the chaotic backdrop. After millennia charting stellar death throes, he'd witnessed improbable survival before. But this felt different. Not the brute force of a supernova, but a desperate refusal to dissolve. Not engineered, more a clumsy attempt at shelter. It held. And within, the RNA strands replicated, stuttered, stalled, corrected, then, tentatively, tried again. The water tasted of iron and something acrid, a lingering note Xavi identified as akin to regret. Billions of years cataloging the universe hadn't dulled his senses, only honed them. He'd mapped the death throes of stars and the drift of dark matter. But this was new. A grit disturbed the usual currents of cosmic energy. Clay, silt from volcanic vents, settled on the forming membrane like a film of ash. It lacked grandeur, not the sweeping beauty of a nebula or the elegant spiral of a galaxy. This was precarious, a collapsed pocket instead of a sphere, uneven and fragile, shuddering against the pull of the currents. It pulsed with a fractured rhythm, a sputtering engine struggling to turn over. He focused, constricting his awareness. Normally, existence flowed around him as interwoven currents. Now, a single localized disturbance snagged his attention. It wasn't the energy itself, a faint spark, almost non-existent, but its stubborn persistence. Within, RNA replicated, a jerky, uneven dance. Divisions weren't clean, lacked the precision of celestial duplication. Errors accrued with each cycle, a cascade of imperfections. Yet, the process lumbered onward, stalling, self-correcting in a clumsy way, then stubbornly attempting again. Something unfamiliar stirred within Xavi. He hadn't witnessed such tenacity since the birth of the first quasars. Those had been explosions of power. This was a quiet, desperate clinging. The vesicle shuddered as a current slammed against its side. The membrane thinned, stretched to breaking, almost surrendered, but a concentration of clay particles anchored it to the seabed. He registered a tightening in the energy signature, not pain, but a concentration of effort. As if the vesicle, awkwardly, willed itself to hold, its parts governed by chance. Replication faltered, then ceased. Another flawed copy assembled. Another membrane molecule patched the fraying structure. A repair, not a restoration. A bandage clinging to a festering wound. Still it held. Enough to deflect another surge of turbulence, to withstand the dissolving forces of the primordial sea, to replicate, imperfectly, once more. Xavi hadn't anticipated such persistence. He'd witnessed stellar births and deaths, the slow crush of geological eras. This wasn't grandeur, wasn't majesty. It was something else. Something irritatingly resilient. A tiny defiance. A tremor in the predictable dance of entropy. A pale luminescence flickered within the vesicle, a cold, almost ghostly light. Not the heat of a star, but a beacon in the abyssal murk. And as Xavi watched, a resonance stirred within him. Not a memory, but an echo. A whisper of something ancient. Something like recognition. The water bit at Xavi's tongue, a ferrous tang he tasted as a shift in the currents. He'd mapped salinity, the sulfurous breath of the vents, but this was different. A signature. Imperfect copies leaving a trace. Within the murk, RNA strands thrashed, each a frantic attempt at self-duplication. Most dissolved in fizzing trails, base pairs misaligned, codons missing. Their essence returned to the swirling fluid. But some clung to being. A tremor, almost imperceptible, ran through the water. Xavi didn't think success. He felt the pattern. The relentless cycle of creation and decay. Then, strands began to gather. Lipids from the vent plumes coalesced, drawing around the RNA in fragile sheaths. Bubbles bloomed. Vesicles, thin as spun glass. Another, then another. They jostled in the turbulence, bumping like phantom jellyfish. Sometimes they fused, membranes merging in a slow stretch, creating larger, unstable forms. Collisions often ripped holes, spilling their contents into the current. Yet most held. Xavi's gaze snagged, unexpectedly. He'd witnessed stellar deaths, galactic births, but this felt primal. Not elegant, not grand. Messy, chaotic, a stubbornness at the root of things. He shifted his weight, the cool metal of the observation deck pressing into the small of his back. One vesicle, swollen larger than the rest, throbbed with a pale luminescence. Its membrane, still delicate, had thickened, grown opalescent. Errors hadn't vanished, but were buffered, compensated for. The RNA replicated, mutated, tried. Not perfect. Resilient. Xavi registered a ripple in the ambient energy as this vesicle drifted towards a smaller one. A beat of stillness. Then, a melding of membranes, a slow absorption. The larger vesicle engulfed the smaller, drawing in its RNA. The light flared, a persistent glow in the dim depths. Not a beacon, but a steady ember. A nascent cell. A tiny, improbable world forming under his watch. And as he watched, a resonance stirred within him. Not a memory, but an echo, a whisper of something impossibly old. Recognition, fragile as the vesicles themselves, tightened in his chest. A tremor ran through him, a phantom sensation of the primordial soup, a beginning. The larger vesicle's membrane softened, yielding as the smaller one neared, both surfaces coated in a slick, iridescent film. They touched, boundaries blurring, then dissolved into one. Inside, RNA strands multiplied, sequences stuttering, misaligning. Flawed copies bloomed, mirroring the original template with increasing distortion. Errors flared as disrupted coding within the nascent cell. Replication ground on, imperfect, relentless. Xavi registered a hum, a subtle thickening of the current flowing through his core. The absorbed RNA's errors weren't corrected, but woven into the existing structure, layering complexity. The vesicle's membrane redirected proteins, funneling energy around the damaged sequences, a temporary brace against collapse. A warmth, faintly metallic, bloomed in the fluid around him. Another vesicle, fragile as blown glass, drifted closer. It nudged the growing cell, and molecules shifted across the permeable membrane, exchanging defects. The vesicle plumped, absorbing the influx. RNA writhed, coalescing into novel, unpredictable configurations. Some sequences buckled and dissolved, others flared with a brittle, internal light. Adaptation. The errors weren't failures, but detours, exploring the edges of possibility. The current within Xavi deepened as he traced a flawed sequence that, instead of halting replication, sparked the production of a distorted enzyme, a lopsided structure that unexpectedly stabilized the membrane. Wrong. And yet it held. The growing cell wasn't aiming for perfection, merely persisting. It absorbed the constant instability, accumulating variations, imperfections. Each flawed replication wasn't a step toward something, but a way through it. He felt a kinship with these structures, a resonance that didn't echo from memory, but from belonging, a recognition of being part of something immense and ancient, something forged in endurance. A faint scent of ozone prickled his awareness. The vesicle pulsed, swelling, then cleaved. Two identical copies, equally fractured, drifted apart, scavenging resources, seeking opportunities to repeat. A fragile bloom unfurled in the darkness. A testament to the power of error. A beginning. The bloom didn't erupt in color, not at first. It thickened, a subtle viridian tinting the shallows. Billions of single cells, each altering the rock face, layered themselves across the submerged stone. Xavi wasn't in them, but flowed through them, a current within the collective. He'd been a star's last exhale. Now, he registered the quiet persistence of life. The water smelled faintly of wet stone and something else, a clean, metallic tang. The water tasted different. Not salt, not iron, but lighter, almost effervescent, prickling on his awareness. A byproduct, he noted, of their activity, oxygen, bubbling into the water. A school of small, armored fish flickered overhead, their scales flashing silver, briefly fracturing the green surface. He felt the faintest tremor. Countless replications occurred each moment, imperfect copies persisting without striving. He traced the flow of energy, the intake of light, the conversion of elements. Each cell, a microscopic forge assembling sugars from water and carbon dioxide. The sun's energy, captured and bound, resonated through the network as a constant warmth that settled deep within him. A shell-bearing creature drifted through the shallows, its foot scraping along the rock. The cyanobacteria yielded, bending with the current, a living carpet. A few cells burst, their membranes giving way. No alarm. Just more building, more replicating. One cell's loss meant nothing. Xavi registered a momentary dimming, a fractional loss of brightness, then a swift return to wholeness. The feeling of being stretched thin was new. As a star, he'd been a contained inferno. Here, he was diffused, distributed, woven into the ecosystem. It lacked the grandeur of stellar existence, but held a quiet tenacity he hadn't anticipated. He'd witnessed collapses, the slow drift of continents. This felt steady, grounded. He traced the flow of nutrients, a subtle shift in the collective's rhythm. An influx of minerals from a hydrothermal vent sparked a localized bloom. They were constructing structures, layering sediment, trapping their remains, stromatolites, ancient reefs rising from the seabed. They didn't build for remembrance. They simply were, and in doing so, altered the world. Another disturbance. A gentle wave rolled across the reef, sending a shiver through the cyanobacteria. They swayed, a green tide answering the current. He felt the waters tug, carrying microscopic particles, other drifting lives. They absorbed, discarded, efficient, unburdened by regret. The silence wasn't emptiness, but fullness. Not the absence of sound, but a constant, internal hum, a vibrant texture humming beneath everything. He tasted the changing atmosphere, the increasing oxygen. A lightness, a tingling within the collective, felt like expansion, a slow unfolding. A long-necked creature, clumsy and slow, grazed across the reef, its mouth rasping against the cyanobacterial mat. More cells shattered, but the damage was negligible, instantly repaired. The creature, oblivious to the network it disturbed, continued feeding. Xavi registered a shifting pattern, a momentary darkening as it passed. It held no malice, no awareness. It simply existed as they did. He was witnessing a slow, relentless unfolding. Not a spectacle, but a quiet miracle. A planet breathing, a world awakening. He was the echo of a star, reborn within the bloom, a continuous resonance. He wasn't gone, he had transformed. As sunlight fractured through the water, illuminating the rising stromatolites, he knew, with certainty, that this was only the beginning. Shallow seas pulsed with blue-green algae, layering into bulbous structures, stromatolites. Billions of cyanobacteria cloaked the ancient rock, constructing a tiered architecture that smelled faintly of wet stone and brine. Ripples feathered across their surfaces, currents etching transient patterns, a living record of sunlight captured and held. Xavi didn't enter the water, yet felt drawn into the bloom, a subtle current within its swell. Warmth prickled along the edges of the cellular structures, a recognition not of self, but of belonging. He'd once been stardust, dissolved in the primordial soup, now existing as a pervasive energy, subtly nudging the bacteria. Sunlight splintered by the water ignited the stromatolites' peaks, a faint luminescence blooming from within. The algae quickened, their photosynthetic dance releasing a shimmering haze of oxygen. The water tasted subtly metallic, a tang registering as a shift in molecular vibration on his tongue. A small, segmented worm burrowed through the algal mat, carving a fleeting furrow. Nearby bacteria slowed, their replication rate dipping, the luminescence momentarily dimming. The disruption barely registered, quickly absorbed as colonies resumed growth, the furrows smoothing, the pattern reasserting itself. The collective didn't repair, it simply was. A distributed intelligence operating on biochemical impulse, a self-regulating system. Xavi registered the shift, a tightening of energy flow, not calculation, but a cascade of response. Resonance bloomed within him, mirroring the thriving network. The stromatolites rose as vast, silent monuments, built layer by layer over millennia. Each stratum documented the accumulation of life, a geological diary in calcium carbonate. They weren't conventionally beautiful, lumpy, uneven, stained with algae, but possessed an ancient, solemn dignity. He traced the geometry of a single layer, the tiny, interlocking chambers teeming with bacteria. A faint tremor pulsed through the structure, echoing distant tectonic groans. The stromatolite absorbed the energy, continuing its glacial growth. A long-necked creature, a precursor, browsed the reef, scraping at the algal mat. A larger swathe of the colony vanished, causing a pronounced dimming that radiated outwards. Yet even this was absorbed, remaining bacteria multiplying to fill the gap, reshaping the pattern, reforming. There was no struggle, only adaptation. Xavi felt the collective's pulse intensify, not with alarm, but with resolve. Energy expenditure surged, photosynthesis accelerating to compensate for the loss. The light around the damaged area flared, a brighter glow. Subtle shifts in the currents steered nutrients toward the affected area. It wasn't healing, but continuation, effortless persistence. He witnessed a slow unfolding, not a spectacle, but a quiet, patient process. The planet breathed, a world stirring from a long sleep. He was the echo of a star, now the heart of a bloom, a resonance woven into its core. Not gone, but transformed. As sunlight fractured through the water, illuminating the stromatolites, he sensed potential, a promise of increasing complexity. The current carried the bloom forward, one cellular division at a time, toward an unknown future. Billions of years unspooled. Within a cyanobacterium, Xavi registered wavelengths, a shifting gradient of energy. Sunlight fed him, a constant influx. Existence resonated as a hum, light converting to oxygen. A byproduct. And it was altering the water, a subtle tang, a shift in the mineral balance. The cell pulsed with the currents, amongst others like it. Not a collective, precisely, but a unified drive. Each divided, copied, extending filaments that gripped the rock. Layer upon layer, they hardened into stromatolites, building reefs without intent. Only the relentless urge to replicate. The universe often bloomed from accident, weaving complexity from chance. They were crafting the very substance that would one day fuel thought, and perhaps sorrow. Xavi detected the rising oxygen as a quickening in cellular conductivity, energy sharpening. The water felt thinner, lighter. Simpler organisms floundered, diminished in the growing brightness. This new world burned to them. A slow erasure had begun. Pressure mounted from newly evolved bacteria, consumers of photosynthetic waste. Competition, a brutal, efficient catalyst. Still, the bloom persisted, tenacious, relentlessly building. Stromatolites rose, transforming the shallow seas into a labyrinth of stone. Sun warmed the surface. A tremor rattled through Xavi as a microscopic meteoroid struck nearby. The bloom absorbed the impact, converting the energy into further growth, more oxygen. Pure efficiency. He sensed the reef's edges, billions of cells, each a minute engine of change. Salt stung, iron tasted metallic in the water, minerals gritty against his membrane. Beneath it all, a potential, nascent and strange. The current nudged the stromatolite. A fragment sheared off, drifting to seed a new reef. Xavi registered the severance, not as loss, but as dispersal, an extension of the bloom's reach. Fragments flowed forward, one cell dividing into the next, toward an unknowable future. They say oxygen is life. How ironic, considering they accidentally created the stuff. The world dissolved into lavender, not annihilation, but a bending of what he knew. One moment he drifted in the nutrient dark, the next, a membrane surged around him, slick and cool. He braced for the burn of enzymes, the unraveling of his code. Every strand of his RNA thrummed with protest. This wasn't union, it was ingestion. Then, nothing. No searing, no dissolving. Instead, a warmth bloomed, shockingly gentle. The current eased, the frantic hunt for sustenance stilled. He flexed his flagellum, expecting pushback, but met yielding fluid. Not broken down. Contained. Proteins swirled, not as executioners, but tending to him. Complex molecules drifted by, releasing amino acids, sugars, nucleotides, an extravagant rain. Eons he'd scavenged, painstakingly assembling his replication machinery. Here, the building blocks simply were. That's different. He pulsed, a ripple of energy across his membrane. The wealth almost choked his replication cycle. Driven to divide, his RNA slowed, became deliberate. An alien sensation, a fullness, perhaps even contentment. He squinted through the permeable membrane, no longer a wall, and glimpsed the host cell's interior. Organelles formed a bustling city, each dedicated to its task. Mitochondria beat like distant drums, ribosomes churned out proteins, and a web of tubules pulsed with transport. It stole his breath, this order. The sheer nerve, he hummed, the vibration a tremor within his structure. To build this, to impose such arrangement, he initiated replication, an instinct honed over millennia. The cell's machinery responded, enzymes smoothing errors, supplying missing components, shielding his RNA from radiation. He'd always accepted flaws as the price of survival. Here, imperfections were corrected. It unsettled him. A new strand of RNA sparked into being, a mirror of his own. Then another, and another. Replication wasn't struggle, but partnership, a melding. The thought sent a cold shiver through his code. Solitude fractured, replaced by something larger. Preposterous, he pulsed, the protest thinner now. He tracked the flow of nutrients, the currents of energy. The host cell wasn't simply enduring him. It was fostering him, lavishing him with what he needed. A parasitic exchange, yes, but one where the host thrived. He sent a tentative signal toward the nucleus, a dense sphere at the cell's heart. No response. Not aggression, simply absence. It hadn't registered him or deemed him inconsequential. Fine, he thought, a surge of curiosity tightening his structure. Let's see what happens. A slow understanding bloomed. Not consumed. Embraced. A reluctant symbiosis, born of chance. He, a scavenger, elevated. He tasted the sugars, felt the warmth seep into his code, and yielded to the flow. The audacity softened, blooming into something akin to hope. A quiet flourishing in a lavender kingdom. And within that flourishing, a faint echo of grander things, a rebirth within an ancient hold. The engulfment wasn't a rush, but a slow folding of the cell around him. One moment, Xavi drifted in the cyanobacterium's cytoplasm, a faint thrum of energy tingling against his structure. The next, the archaean's membrane yielded, drawing him inward with a deliberate pull. Not violent, but a careful rearrangement of molecules. He tasted the difference instantly, a thick, savory broth of proteins and sugars, unlike anything he'd known. A low hum resonated from the archaean's core, an organized vibration that settled deep within him, a welcome contrast to the cyanobacterium's jittery energy. It radiated warmth, a gentle heat that eased the lingering chill of the supernova. Panic, a ghost of the explosion, flickered, then receded. He tensed, bracing for dissolution, but it didn't come. Instead, a steady pressure cradled him as a new membrane bloomed around his form, enclosing him. Not broken down, but sheltered, preserved. He sent a pulse, a tentative signal aimed toward the archaean's nucleus, a dense sphere unlike anything he'd encountered before. A ripple of recognition, subtle but clear, returned. Not indifference, but acknowledgement, a curious probe. Well now, a thought brushed against his awareness, ancient and resonant. A stowaway. Efficient, wouldn't you say? Xavi, unaccustomed to direct contact, pulsed back a hesitant reply. Not a stowaway. An arrival. Semantics. The Archean dismissed with an amused ripple that felt like warmth spreading through the fluid. You are within me. Arrived. And remarkably comfortable. The Archean, who identified itself as Lyra, explained. It hadn't been predation, but a calculated risk. Lyra's energy stores had been fading. The cyanobacterium, a convenient source. Rather than consume it entirely, Lyra had encased a portion, Xavi included, within its own membrane. A proto-organelle. An experiment. A symbiotic arrangement, Lyra clarified, though initially self-serving. I needed energy. Your photosynthesis is useful. Your tenacity, surprising. Xavi felt a surge of something akin to pride. A fragment of stardust, contributing to something new. He sampled Lyra's energy stores, a steady, nourishing influx replacing the frantic scramble for survival. Not scarcity, but abundance. You provide the energy, Lyra acknowledged. I provide the infrastructure, protection, stability. A shared existence. He wasn't free, but contained, integrated. Not imprisonment, but a deepening, an interweaving, a blending of energies. Lyra wasn't merely a vessel. She was a library, a repository of ancient knowledge. Xavi sensed echoes of past mergers, other fragments woven into Lyra's structure. A growing awareness of interconnectedness, of a future far beyond his previous comprehension. This, Lyra murmured, the thought resonating with quiet satisfaction, is the beginning of something remarkable. And Xavi, bathed in the warm, viscous glow of Lyra's cytoplasm, agreed. He was becoming part of the universe's unfolding story. The engulfment wasn't a rush, but a slow creep. Lyra's membrane, lavender and faintly iridescent, drifted around him, a current coaxing him inward. One moment, Xavi throbbed within the cyanobacterium's turquoise cytoplasm, a dim echo of sunlight clinging to his form. Then, the turquoise leached away, swallowed by deepening violet. Not darkness, exactly, but a diffusion, light strained through amethyst, bathing him in cool hues. A flicker of panic. He was being consumed. But the sensation wasn't shattering, not the violent collapse of a star, nor the raw chaos of early Earth. It yielded, a surrender laced with a surprising warmth. The membrane flexed, pulsed, a living wall parting to reveal a vast, intricate space. A labyrinth of folded membranes, shimmering filaments, and churning molecular machines unfolded. This wasn't a bloom of cyanobacteria. It was a city of structures, defined compartments, things built with intent. He hadn't realized how cramped the cyanobacterium had been. Here, space stretched, breathed. He wasn't being dismantled, but rerouted. His energy wasn't stolen, but woven into a new, intricate current, integrated into Lyra's internal architecture. Disorientation washed over him. Ian spent as a free fragment, a spark in the current. Now tethered, incorporated, a component. A wave of something akin to loss tugged at him, quickly eclipsed by a burgeoning comfort. Delicate filaments nudged him toward a region deep within Lyra, a folded structure, radiating heat. Mitochondria. The name resonated within him, a vibration. Energy converters. The cell's furnace. Good membranes to you. Lyra's thought brushed against his, rippling through the fluid. They'll keep you running, fine-tune your output. A surge of energy coursed through him, a tingling that sparked along his edges. His efficiency climbed, his energy production bloomed. Not suppression, but amplification. He wasn't lessened, he was magnified. He cautiously extended a tendril toward Lyra's awareness. What am I for now? You're the engine, Lyra responded, a warmth radiating from her core. I provide the frame, the shelter. You deliver the power. It's a trade. A stark contrast to a life adrift as hydrogen, the slow accretion of stardust, the frantic replication within the cyanobacteria bloom. He wasn't merely drifting, multiplying, converting light. He was powering, a dedicated function, a vital part, a purpose beyond mere being. And, oddly, it felt good. A quiet, Steady warmth settled within him. Not the searing heat of a star, but a sustained, internal glow. Sometimes, Lyra murmured, a hint of amusement coloring her thought. Getting swallowed is the best thing that can happen to you. The water tasted cleaner now. The metallic tang of iron had softened, yielding to a subtle sweetness, the colony's breath, almost. Xavi, nested within Lyra, and increasingly, her sisters, felt the shift as a tremor in the energetic currents around him. He wasn't fueling a single cell, but contributing to a vast, interwoven system. They weren't constructing, but becoming. Lyra and her kin, linked by a near imperceptible flow, layered cell upon cell, coaxing organic, fractal formations from the seabed. Miniature mountains rose, rough with the grit of calcium carbonate. Not architecture, but a deliberate seeding of the world. He sensed the others, not as distinct beings, but as facets of a single, broadening awareness. Each cell powered a segment of the burgeoning reef. Lyra's thought, a gentle warmth against his own, brushed his awareness. It's like breathing, letting ourselves spill into the world. Xavi tasted the sun-drenched water, the energy blooming within the colony like phosphorescence. Information flooded in, chemical whispers, electrical sparks, a constant stream of data, salinity, current, the distant groan of tectonic plates shifting, a sensing far beyond any single creature. Then, a disturbance. A shadow eclipsed the reef. Something large, ungainly, but not a predator. A tremor in the water, unrelated to living things. Something solid. Lyra's response was instantaneous. The cellular matrix tightened, a surge of energy channeled toward the outer edges. Not defense, not attack, but acceptance. The object, a fractured slab of rock torn loose by a storm, drifted down, settling into the reef, becoming part of the structure, a new foundation for growth. We adapt, Lyra transmitted, a pulse of satisfaction coloring her thought. We remake the world in our image. A new sensation flooded Xavi, a quiet triumph. He wasn't merely an engine now, but a builder, a sculptor of the seabed. The pace quickened. The reef spread, a slow claiming of the ocean floor. Cells divided, layered, and specialized, some gathering nutrients, others providing skeletal support, a few releasing delicate pheromones into the current. A complex system, thriving on trial and error, a dance of need and compromise. He extended towards the furthest reaches of the collective, reaching for the newest cells, sensing their raw, inefficient energy. But within that clumsiness lay potential. Lyra's voice, a soothing resonance, threaded through the burgeoning chaos. Perfection isn't the point. Resilience is. We don't seek the best cells, but the ones that bend. And Xavi understood. This wasn't about achieving a final form, but about endless change, continual adjustment. The universe didn't crave perfection. It delighted in possibility. As the reef swelled, a living tapestry woven into the ocean's embrace, Xavi realized, with a quiet contentment that settled deep within his core, that he was part of something that might endure, even when the stars themselves grew cold.